This is Glenn Jacobson, student at National Louis University in the Technology and Education Master's Program. I am presenting an in-progress draft of my research proposal. It's a technology use project, and I called it Choosing Between iPads and Chromebooks for Online Assessments. What's better for progress monitoring and high-stakes testing? My abstract basically breaks down that in the past, we've come across incidents of testing, of PARCC testing, NWEA testing, and to prepare students for the future, I'm really concerned with what the administration should purchase with upcoming budget money. And the administration has actually asked me in the past, which has led to some of the purchases. I've set up a table of contents that breaks down all of the pieces in this proposal. It's relatively self-explanatory, including an appendix with some additional artifacts, which I intend to add more artifacts to. So CPS has had some changes as far as what they've been doing in the physical sense of their technology. While there's not any major plan that's available to direct what's going on, at least not from my perspective, or that is put out to the general public, they do have goals about what they want to do: transform, enable, operate, and enhance productivity. What I actually have seen is there's been a few things, like a major increase in wireless connectivity. There has been the Google platform that has been launched for staff and students, and also the phasing out of old technology. To decide whether iPads or Chromebooks would be better for testing, I took some of each and I set up my sixth graders to be split between either an iPad or a Chromebook. I also wanted to check on task behavior with those, and that was basically by just seeing immediately what they were doing and tracking that on-task behavior until they finished the assessment. Afterwards, they would complete a digital survey using a Google form, which would have some Likert scales as well as some short response to get their perspective on using the device for that assessment. The questions that really frame up this proposal are: do the students perform better on iPads or Chromebooks when taking online English language arts assessments, and specifically the STAR test, which I'll speak to a little bit later, and which device do the students prefer to use or feel more comfortable or familiar with, and which one shows more on-task behavior, as well as do any of those corroborate or contradict each other. I pulled a lot of literature from research studies that had to do with high-stakes testing, progress monitoring, mostly in middle school, as well as iPad use for on-task behavior, other mobile technology use, and even this Texas Technology Immersion Pilot, which was directly related to increasing the TAKS achievement, which is their Texas Assessment of Knowledge and Skills. The results that I got from collecting all that data were pretty interesting. There was a lot of up and down scores on this STAR test, which can range anywhere from the 300s to the 900s. Some students scored in 300s, some students scored in 900s. But from on this test, you can see a basic report and how a student's progress might be tracked. Now, actual results, this is for iPads. Students really, there were a lot of deficits, or their scores decreased in a lot of cases, and which resulted in actually an overall decrease of 6.1, which is an average incremental change of a scale score. The Chromebooks also had a lot of up and down as far as the change from one test to the next, yet everything, it still ended up with an overall average which showed some growth, a positive improvement. After students completed their assessment, they took a survey. This is actually exactly the survey. It asked them their comfort level with the device. Are they familiar with this or a similar device? Did they have any technical issues? What did they like? What did they dislike? Now, the results I received from this, on the Likert scale, students gauged they were really fairly comfortable with the iPad and familiar with it, or other tablets. There were a number of reasons why they liked it, as shown by this pie chart. But in this case, with the iPads and the Chromebooks, all the kids said, except for in rare occasion, that there was nothing that they didn't like about it. With the Chromebooks, they actually are higher Likert scales on the comfort and familiarity, with actually fewer categories for why they liked it that were spread more evenly. My overall conclusion is that the students scored better in the Chromebooks. There were students who actually had very poor scores throughout, or significant negative changes, but both groups had two students like that, so I feel it kind of counteracts each other and makes it much less of an outlier. The observations, however interesting, could have been handled a little better because the data was hard to gather. It was easy to collect, but very time consuming, much less the way the form was set up. We didn't capture everything that was really taking place there, because what I noticed was students with iPads were moving it, shifting it, moving it around, where students with Chromebooks were leaving it still. Likewise, the iPads, it was easier to switch to a different app and do something totally different, where the Chromebooks, the students seemed to stay on the test the entire time. What would I recommend? From everything I've seen, there wasn't huge significant in the data, but clearly in both the scores, observations, and even student survey with preference, and all that information still points towards the Chromebook is the better device for progress monitoring, and likely then for online high stakes testing. I would recommend that it starts at a classroom level, but I would like to see this take off to a school level, which would require a lot of training for staff to make sure that they're proctoring the test properly, and preparing those progress monitoring opportunities to mimic the high stakes testing that takes place sometimes multiple times a year. Likewise, to be able to use that progress monitoring data so that it's not just teachers aren't just relying on one or two sets of data from the high stakes tests, such as NWEA, to shape their instruction. I think if the budget can afford adding a cart or two of Chromebooks, it would be strongly advised. Pricing is relatively reasonable when you compare it to other mobile devices or even laptops. And I just see it as a both more safe and effective way to give students the best possible chance to be successful, both just during their education, opportunities in class, and when they're faced with high stakes assessment. I plan to continue to add items to the appendix. I also intend to review and elaborate if I feel there's something lacking, or if there's a lack of flow in this project. Thank you for your time and consideration.